My key takeaway from the session was sharing my experience of the energy transition process in Costa Rica, where more than 98% of the electricity is generated by renewable sources. These include a combination of hydroelectricity, wind, geothermal, biomass, and solar energy. Our greatest challenge in reducing emissions lies within the transport sector, which is relying on fossil fuels. Implementing the necessary changes will require actions and policies involving various stakeholders from across society, including public and private sectors. The success of these changes hangs on two main pillars. Firstly, educating people about climate change so they can understand the urgency of taking actions to mitigate its impacts. And secondly, engaging diverse stakeholders in participatory process to reach agreements on new policies and regulations.
Yeah, so there are different topics that are of importance for the net zero. First one is, how do we prepare ourselves to understand what the different regions want, what the different markets want. We cannot fit all into one size. So we have to have like a customization or, adapt ourselves to the market and the regional needs. Second is what is the readiness of the technology and how the technology can help. And third is, what are the actions we should do to accelerate things?
Well, definitely that the problem is complex and we have multi-phase solutions that need to interact with one another. But I think that the best and the most exciting takeaway was the solutions do exist and that we need to learn from good experiences and good practices and apply them in other contexts. So in a way that these sort of interactions and exchanges are definitely supporting a more holistic understanding of the problem.
My key takeaway from the session on energy, social justice in Global South is that the world needs to pursue clean energy for all and ensure that equitable transitions address health while also focusing on climate and social co-benefits.
Diversity in local needs and customs have to be prioritized over external mandates and processes if we want to reimagine energy access in the Global South. While the term Global South is convenient to club developing economies, it can be misleading if we attempt to develop some common framework to achieve energy justice for the quote Global South unquote per se. What works for country A in the Global South does not work for country B. Within the Global South, there is a huge disparity in access, purchasing power, and cultural nuances related to clean cooking energy solutions. Even at the regional scale, use of clean cooking is greater than 50% in Latin America and barely 10% in sub-Saharan Africa. So there is no one-size-fits-all mechanism to achieve energy justice. We first need to understand the context and the history of what worked in the past, what did not work, and honestly account for the reasons via collaboration with local institutions. Just transition will only come via just collaboration and not imposing mandates from the rich and powerful over the Global South.
My key takeaway from the session was that energy provision, energy access, and social justice in the Global South are inextricably linked. Energy access and decarbonization have to be addressed at the same time and also in the context of development. Lasting sustainable solutions that need to be tailor-made to local contexts will require a holistic approach in which everyone must be involved, especially women and youth. And there is a complex web of interactions between researchers who generate the data and propose interventions and policymakers and implementers. And success is unlikely without appropriate financial solutions in the Global South. After all, adoption will never happen without affordability.
My key takeaway from my session on science communications is that the energy crisis can mean different things to different people. So we need diverse perspectives and myriad voices in communications and decision making. For these reasons, at Women and Inclusivity in Sustainable Energy Research, also known as WISER, we are committed to empowering our membership through professional development, collaboration, and networking. Our aim is to motivate women and non-binary scholars to diversify voices in the media, diversify informed opinions, and diversify knowledge production and sharing in sustainable energy research so that we can all be included in the conversations and accordingly the solutions.
I will give you 3 takeaways, actually, 3 tips for scientists looking to make sure that their voices are heard in policymaking. The first is to be picking your audience. People often want to go straight to the highest level of government, but if your research is more locally or regionally tailored, then you should start with a local or regional office. You'll be more likely to get a response and your impact will be greater. Second, you should be looking for policy windows. That means thinking about how to tie your research to current events and the headlines that are top of mind for policymakers. And third and finally, synthesize. Not very many policymakers are going to read a whole technical paper or even an abstract, but if you pique their interest with a few key sentences about an issue, they'll follow up for more details.
My key takeaway from my session on science communication is that every one of us has to be deliberate, not just in our science, but in what we want to communicate about it, to whom and how. As you reach out to people, think about each one of them as an individual and explain in plain language why it is what you're doing matters to them, as well as how it can improve the world.
Well, on the electricity sector, Costa Rica has done a very good job. More than 99% of the population, they have access to electricity, but we still need to work a lot on subsidies because we need to put them on focal population. Subsidies should go to the poverty or extreme poverty population. And the other thing is that we need to work on the price of the electricity. We need to make it more accessible to the people.
I see 4 key things. We need to keep firmly focused on the need to make sustainable solutions affordable. And this means that financing the transition to sustainability is absolutely key. Second, we need to be increasingly inclusive. So researchers and modelers, policymakers, implementers, governments, and civil society from across the globe need to be engaged in a continual dialogue if potential solutions are to make a difference to the real world, to real people, and in their local setting. Then we need to remember that one size can never fit all, that local context is paramount. And finally, and absolutely crucially, nothing can happen without strong governments.
To achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, I think we have to think even more about interdisciplinary work than we already do. For example, people working on SDG 6, which is clean water and sanitation, also get involved with SDG 7, affordable and clean energy, because energy is needed for clean water and sanitation. They then get involved as well with SDG 10, which is reduced inequalities. Who needs the greatest improvements in clean water and sanitation? And they get involved with SDG 13, climate action, because climate affects water supply. So much terrific effort is going on within each goal, and there is good interdisciplinary work between some of the goals, but I think if we can really expand on the work cutting across the many interconnected goals, the entire effort will become more effective, more complete, and faster.
I believe policy commitment through interministerial coordination is key to foster action and incentivize investment in energy infrastructure and distribution in the Global South. The scientific community has a key role to play in generating rigorous evidence and communicating it to policymakers in order for evidence-based decisions to be made.
Yes, so I think that the rich and the powerful nations, they need to follow up on the inspiring words in the development summits and other international platforms by putting money on the table in form of grants or soft loans to build an ecosystem that attracts the private sector investment and talent. Most of the money in climate finance is in loans at market rate. We don't want the same fate for energy access finance because we are trying to develop a market ecosystem where there is none in many countries of the global south. And it is very, very important for the private sector players to see some progress, to have access to data, to have access to infrastructure before they even want to venture and put their money in there. And the private sector will be driven by a brutal, hard calculations on return on investment or ROI. But the governments and the donor agencies and international development agencies, they should come together and try to see that the initial cost, the initial intensive resource that is required to develop a nascent market, to develop this strategic niche, that those are first developed and nurtured, and then that will be a welcoming space for the private investors to come in, because only via a strong government private sector collaboration can we be able to provide affordable, accessible cooking energy in the global south.
So we need, first of all, to see what's the state of the art in an objective way. If we don't know from where we start the baseline, it is difficult to see what's remaining to be done. So we see actually statements that are a bit too pessimistic, and we see other statements that are too optimistic, and we rarely actually see statements about exactly what the baseline is. The baseline is how much this or that sector is consuming exactly energy today and is making exactly emissions. And here is the role of the technology is really key, because only data can tell us, what every sector, what every building, what every factory, for example, is making as emissions and consuming energy. So first is the baseline. Second is the time it takes. And here we have to be absolutely scientific, and our role at the Council of Engineers for Energy Transition is to use the engineers and the scientists into making some projections. Okay, so what's the roadmap that will bring us by 2025, 2030, 2040, 2050 to what level? Okay, and here there is nothing else we can do than making projected scenarios, considering some assumptions, where we say, look, if we put tax on the carbon emissions, for example, what implication it will have on behavior, how the prices of the energy will increase over time. Of course, nobody can predict geopolitics and war properly, but we have to consider some scenarios as well. And if we deploy the technology, for example, and we put it in place, and there is enough motivation and support for deploying that technology, every technology that can collect the data, for example, from buildings and help, acting on the demand, reducing the emissions, reducing the energy consumption, getting more renewables, for example, in place, how much impact will that have by 2020, 2025, 2030, and so on. So these are the things that we have absolutely to see, what's remaining to be done. I'm optimistic because I think technology today can achieve a lot that we could not achieve before.
I really think that we need to increase prioritization of diversity and equity because our current systems do not benefit everyone. And a truly sustainable future should, by definition, be inclusive.
I think we need to be thinking about how we tailor those SDGs to different audiences and different communities. It's one thing to set a top-line goal that gets us all going in the same direction, and then it's another to tailor it to local communities so they can figure out how they best reach it.
I think it's concerning that halfway through we are still lagging behind on many SDGs, and this is even more concerning if we think that in the meantime we had a new war happening, many actually wars happening, and the pandemic, which threaten the most vulnerable. So I think that the most important issue here would be to focus on the interactions between the SDGs. So how can we build synergies across them, and how can we make sure that whatever we do on one side benefits also other things, minimizing the existing trade-offs. This is especially important when it comes to the climate action, which is a specific SDGs, of course, but has influence on many others. And it's important at this point to definitely quantify, compute, and assess the climate co-benefits when it comes to climate and energy transition, of course, but also to understand who is the most vulnerable, who will be most affected by some actions, and how to, again, minimize the negative impacts.